10 trainees surrounded her in the mess hall. A minute later, they discovered she was a Navy SEAL. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Emily Carter sat alone at a corner booth in a bustling restaurant just outside the military base. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, and most of the patrons were focused on their meals, unaware of the simmering tension in the air. The clinking of silverware against plates, the low hum of casual conversation, this was her normal. Her worn military jacket draped loosely over her frame, and she absent-mindedly stirred her coffee as she scanned the room. A few soldiers passed by, offering her nods of acknowledgement. She didn't mind the quiet life she led here, away from the front lines, away from the chaos of the battlefield. But that calm would not last long. At a table near the entrance, a group of 3 young men sat, loud and boisterous, clearly feeling the confidence of their youth and recent training. They laughed amongst themselves, their voices rising with each joke at someone else's expense. One of them, a tall guy with a buzz cut named Jake, spotted Emily sitting alone and nudged his friends. Look at her, all alone. She must be one of those military office girls, too soft for real combat, Jake said, his words tinged with mockery. His friends chuckled, their laughter carrying across the room. Marcus, a stockier guy with a smirk on his face, chimed in. Bet she can't even lift a weapon properly. Probably got her rank handed to her on a silver platter. The third man, Tommy, smaller but no less bold, added, she's probably just here because they need a diversity hire. What a joke. Emily didn't react. She had been in enough situations like this to know better than to engage. Her eyes remained fixed on her coffee, her fingers tapping a rhythm on the edge of the mug. The insults kept coming, each one more personal than the last. What do you think she does, sit behind a desk and file papers all day? Jake continued, looking over at Emily as if he were talking to himself. I mean, come on, she doesn't look like she's ever been in the field. Probably can't even handle basic training. Their voices grew louder, the atmosphere in the room shifting from casual to uncomfortable. Yet Emily remained motionless, her expression calm, almost unreadable. It wasn't until Jake stood up, a grin plastered across his face, that Emily looked up from her coffee. He walked over to her booth with the exaggerated swagger of someone who thought he was in control. Hey, sweetie, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, why don't you tell me what it's like to be a real soldier? Or are you just here for the perks? He leaned against the edge of the table, clearly enjoying the moment. Emily's gaze locked with his, her eyes steady. The room around them seemed to fall into a hush as she finally spoke. You should walk away, she said quietly, her voice soft but with an edge that cut through the tension. Jake froze, his smile faltering for just a moment as he took in the calmness of her tone. It was a challenge, but not the kind he expected. What's your problem, sweetheart? You think you're tough or something, he sneered, his friends slowly gathering around, backing him up with their taunts. Emily didn't flinch. She took a slow breath, her gaze never leaving Jake's, and spoke again, her voice unwavering, last chance. Walk away. The words were simple, yet powerful, carrying a weight that made Jake pause. He opened his mouth to respond but suddenly found himself unsure. Something about her demeanor, too calm, too collected, was starting to unsettle him. He hesitated. And that hesitation was all Emily needed. Without another word, she stood up from the booth with the grace and precision of someone who had spent years honing her skills. In one fluid motion, she shifted into a stance that seemed almost practiced. Before anyone could react, she swiftly disarmed Jake, using his momentum against him. His body hit the floor with a thud, his arms pinned beneath him in a way that left him gasping for air. The other two men lunged forward, but they were no match for Emily's speed. In seconds, she had them both on the ground, their attempts to resist nothing more than a futile struggle. The entire restaurant watched in stunned silence. Emily stood over them, her posture unyielding, as the reality of what had just happened sank in. "You made a mistake," she said, her voice calm but firm. Jake and his friends lay on the floor, breathless, their faces red with shock and embarrassment. No one in the room had expected this. No one had realized that the quiet woman sitting at the corner booth was more than capable of handling herself, and more. It wasn't just her training that made her a force to be reckoned with, it was the sheer composure, the control, that allowed her to turn the tables so effortlessly. And just like that, the room's energy shifted. The mocking whispers turned to murmurs of awe. The once cocky soldiers now found themselves humbled by a woman who had proven them all wrong in mere seconds. "I should have known better," Jake muttered under his breath, but it was too late. Emily Carter was no ordinary woman, and she had just taught them a lesson they would never forget. 5 men, all big and strong, entered a restaurant on a quiet Thursday night. The dim lights reflected off the polished floors as they made their way to the back, loud laughter echoing across the room. At a small table by the window sat Lily Anderson, a woman in her late 20s, casually sipping on a glass of wine. Nothing about her stood out, she looked like any other diner, enjoying a quiet meal alone. But as the men approached, their eyes locked on her. Tommy, the largest of the group, cracked a smile and nodded to his friends. "Look at her, sitting alone like she's some kind of tough girl," he sneered. His voice was loud enough to draw the attention of nearby tables. The others laughed along with him, the sound of their mocking tone filling the air. "What's she doing here? Shouldn't she be at home, cooking or something?" Jake, another one of the men, chimed in, nudging Tommy. The group continued to taunt Lily, not caring about the other diners who were starting to glance over. Tommy took a step closer to her table. "Hey, sweetheart," he said with a smirk, "you lost or something?" Lily, without even flinching, looked up at him. With calm, unblinking eyes. She didn't say anything at first. Her lips barely parted, but the calmness in her gaze seemed to challenge the group to take it further. The men, sensing an easy target, surrounded her. "What, you don't talk?" Marcus said, a sneer creeping into his voice. "Maybe you should. Or we'll make you regret it." The others stood behind Tommy, crossing their arms, clearly enjoying the scene they were creating. As the taunts continued, Lily remained eerily still, only the faintest tightening of her jaw signaling that she had heard enough. Then, without warning, she stood up. The men smirked, thinking they had intimidated her, but there was something in her posture that made them hesitate. "Last chance," Lily said, her voice low but clear. "Walk away, and we forget this ever happened." Tommy laughed, clearly dismissive. "You really think you can take all of us on, girl?" he said, his tone mocking. But something in Lily's stance made the group pause. It was the way she carried herself, controlled, confident, like someone who had been in tougher situations than this. She wasn't backing down. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she muttered, the words just above a whisper but carrying a weight none of them expected. The group took another step forward, but before Tommy could say another word, Lily moved with a speed that took them all by surprise. She grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back in a move that seemed effortless. He yelped in pain, the sound cutting through the room like a knife. The rest of the men reacted too late. Lily, with precision and calm, disarmed Jake in one swift motion, sending his handheld weapon flying across the room. David attempted to shove her away, but she sidestepped, using his momentum against him, sending him crashing into the nearest table. Chris tried to grab her from behind, but she was already 2 steps ahead. In the blink of an eye, she turned and delivered a swift elbow to his ribs, knocking the wind out of him. Within mere seconds, the 5 men were on the floor, stunned and gasping for air. Lily stood tall, her breath steady, eyes scanning the group. The other diners in the restaurant had stopped what they were doing, eyes wide with disbelief. They had been witnesses to something that they would talk about for years to come. Tommy, now on the floor, groaned, trying to gather himself. His eyes flicked between his friends and Lily, realizing that they had seriously underestimated her. Who the hell are you?" he stammered, his bravado gone. Lily didn't respond at first, letting the question hang in the air. Then, in a voice that carried authority, she simply said, "A Navy SEAL." The room went silent, and the men, now realizing the gravity of their mistake, sat frozen in shock. The realization hit them all at once. They had attacked someone who could, and did, defend herself with lethal efficiency. As Lily turned and walked away, the group of men remained on the floor, unable to move. The shock of the encounter still fresh in their minds. They would never forget the lesson they had learned in the span of just a few seconds. As Lily walked away from the chaos in the restaurant, the shocked silence of the room followed her every step. The 5 men, now defeated and humiliated, remained on the floor, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Their pride was shattered, and their confidence was gone. They had thought they could intimidate this woman, but in a matter of seconds, she had flipped the script on them in a way none of them could have predicted. As Lily reached the door, she paused and turned her head slightly, her voice calm and controlled. "Next time," she said softly, "don't assume." The words hung in the air for a moment before she exited, leaving behind a room full of people who would never forget the sight of her strength and the speed with which she had dismantled the attackers. Outside, the night air was cool, the streets quiet, but inside her, the adrenaline was still pumping. Her military training had kicked in automatically, and she was already assessing the situation, calculating the risks and the moves. Lily wasn't one to revel in the victory, she was more concerned about the fact that she had been attacked in the first place. It was rare for her to be confronted in such a manner, but it wasn't unexpected either. As a Navy SEAL, Lily had been trained for moments like this. It was the quick thinking, the calmness under pressure, that had kept her from panicking. But even she couldn't deny the rush of satisfaction she felt after handling the situation so efficiently. Back inside the restaurant, the manager approached the group of men, still lying on the floor, with a sense of disbelief on his face. He had seen many things in his years of running this place, but nothing quite like this. "What the hell happened here?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Tommy, still gasping for air, looked up at him with wide eyes. "That woman, she's not who we thought she was." The manager raised an eyebrow, glancing at the others, who were still struggling to regain their composure. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Who was she?" Tommy shook his head, still in shock. "She's a Navy SEAL, man. We had no idea." The manager's jaw dropped. He glanced around the room at the onlookers, all of whom had witnessed the spectacle. He could tell that the story of what had just unfolded was going to spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, Lily had already made her way down the street, her mind focused and calm. She didn't need the attention or recognition. She was just doing what she had been trained to do. But as she walked, her thoughts began to wander. She remembered the faces of the men who had attacked her, the cocky arrogance they had shown before the confrontation. It was a reminder that not everyone respected the power of the military, and that made her job, her mission, all the more important. She had always believed that part of being a SEAL was not only about fighting in the field but also about showing people what it meant to be strong, to stand up for yourself, and to never back down. As she walked, she saw a group of people sitting on a bench, chatting and laughing, oblivious to the events that had just unfolded in the restaurant. She realized that, for many, life went on as usual. But for her, it was different. She was part of a world few would ever understand, and that was exactly the way she liked it. The next morning, Lily was back at base. The events from the night before felt distant now, a blur in the back of her mind. But her teammates noticed something different about her when she walked into the operations room. There was a subtle change in the way she carried herself, a quiet confidence that seemed to emanate from her every move. "You look like you've seen some action," one of her fellow SEALs, Mark, said with a grin. Lily gave him a small smile but didn't respond. She wasn't one for idle conversation, especially when there was work to be done. The team had already been briefed about a new mission, one that would take them into hostile territory. As Lily reviewed the mission plan, she couldn't help but think about the events of the previous night. She was used to danger, to being in high-pressure situations, but this was different. It was personal. The idea of someone underestimating her because she was a woman, because of the way she looked, was something she had encountered many times throughout her career. But it never ceased to remind her of the importance of what she did. It wasn't just about the physical strength, the weapons, or the tactics. It was about the mindset. Being a SEAL meant you had to be mentally tough, unshakable, and always prepared for the unexpected. As the team gathered around the briefing table, Lily stood at the front, ready to lead. There was no hesitation in her movements, no second-guessing. She was focused, and her eyes, sharp and intense, locked onto each member of her team. "Let's move out," she said simply, her voice commanding but calm. As they left the room, ready for the mission ahead, Lily's thoughts shifted once again. She wasn't going to let the previous night's events define her. She had a job to do, and nothing was going to stand in her way. Not even the memory of those 5 men who had underestimated her. She was a Navy SEAL, and she was always ready for what came next. The mission briefing was sharp and direct, as always. Lily stood with her team, reviewing the intel they had gathered on the target. A high-value target, an insurgent leader with ties to multiple criminal organizations, was located in a remote village. The plan was simple: move in, neutralize the threat, and extract without leaving a trace. As always, the SEALs were the best at what they did, and Lily knew this mission would be no different. She was focused, her mind already running through every possible scenario, every potential complication. There was no room for error. The team was ready, and they knew the stakes. The sun was setting as they geared up, the quiet hum of the bass in the background a stark contrast to the tension building inside Lily. She checked her gear one last time, ensuring everything was in place. Her Barrett .50 was mounted and ready, the weight of the rifle comforting in her hands. Her teammates were busy, each preparing in their own way, but there was a calm confidence among them. Lily's presence had a way of settling the group, even when things were at their most uncertain. As the team filed out of the operations room, they didn't speak much. Words weren't necessary, each member knew their role and trusted the others to execute theirs perfectly. They moved with precision, like the well-oiled machine they were, each step deliberate and measured. As they boarded the transport, Lily took a moment to glance around at the faces of her team. Each one of them had their own story, their own reason for being there, but they were all united in one common purpose: to protect, to fight, and to win. The flight was uneventful, the quiet hum of the aircraft lulling some of the men into a brief moment of rest. But not Lily. She remained alert, her mind still running through the plan, visualizing every move they would need to make. The target area was still a few hours away, and the night would be their ally, masking their movements under the cover of darkness. When they finally reached the drop zone, Lily's heart rate increased. It was time. The door to the aircraft opened, and the rush of cool air hit her face. Without a word, the team jumped, free-falling into the night, their bodies slicing through the air with the practiced ease of soldiers who had done this 1,000 times. As they hit the ground, Lily rolled to absorb the impact, her movements fluid and controlled. She was already on her feet, her weapon at the ready. The team spread out, taking their positions around the target area, using hand signals to communicate. Every second counted. The target's compound was just ahead, a simple structure in the middle of the village, but inside, it held the key to their success. Lily's mind was clear, her training taking over as she surveyed the perimeter. There were no lights, no sounds, just the quiet of the night. The enemy, unaware of their presence, was about to be caught off guard. As they closed in, Lily's instincts kicked in. She could feel the tension in the air, every muscle in her body coiled and ready for action. She signaled to the team to move in, and they did so with swift, silent precision. The compound was surrounded in seconds. The doors were breached, and the team moved in. Lily's eyes scanned the room, locking onto the target, a man sitting at a table, surrounded by documents and maps. He didn't have time to react. The sound of her rifle echoed in the small room, the shot clean and precise. The target dropped without a sound. The team moved quickly to secure the area, ensuring there were no other threats. They were in, they were out, and they had completed the mission with the professionalism and efficiency that had come to define them. As they extracted, Lily's mind was already shifting gears. The mission was a success, but the job was never truly over. They would be back at base soon, and there would be another mission waiting, another challenge to face. But for now, she allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. It was another day, another victory. The job was done, and they had once again proven why they were the best at what they did. As the team returned to base, Lily's thoughts turned to the events from the night before. The confrontation in the restaurant was still fresh in her mind. It had been a reminder of what she could do, of what she had trained for. It wasn't just about the physical strength, it was about the mindset, the ability to stay calm and focused under pressure. She had shown the world that night who she was, and she wasn't going to let anyone forget it. The SEALs weren't just soldiers, they were legends, and Lily Anderson was one of them. As the team returned to base after another successful mission, the sense of accomplishment was palpable, but for Lily Anderson, it was just another day in the life of a Navy SEAL. She had been through countless missions, each one demanding precision, focus, and a level of mental toughness few could understand. But what kept her going, what kept her sharper than ever, was the constant reminder that her work was far from over. The world didn't stop, and neither could she. As the team disembarked from the transport, the weight of the operation lifted off their shoulders, but Lily knew they couldn't afford to relax for too long. The next mission was already waiting, as it always did. She made her way to the debriefing room, her mind still sharp, reviewing the mission in her head. Her team had done their job perfectly, no mistakes, no wasted time. But it was the little things, the nuances, that always mattered most. The way the target's men had reacted when they realized the SEALs were on their tail, the way the mission unfolded with near-flawless execution. That was what made the difference. "Nice job out there, Lily," Mark said, his voice filled with genuine respect as he walked past her, giving her a brief nod. She returned the nod, acknowledging his words but not dwelling on them. There was no time to celebrate. The next mission was already being discussed, and she needed to be ready. The debriefing started as usual, with the operation commander going over the mission details, breaking down what went right and what could have been done better. Lily's mind wandered for a moment, not because she wasn't paying attention, but because her thoughts were on the encounter from the night before. The 5 men who had attacked her in the restaurant, they had no idea who she was. They had underestimated her, and in that brief moment, they had learned what it truly meant to face a Navy SEAL. It wasn't just about being physically capable, it was about mindset, about being prepared for the unexpected, and about knowing when to act decisively. She had proven that in the blink of an eye. But she couldn't afford to get distracted by it. There was work to do, and she had to stay focused. As the debriefing wrapped up, Lily grabbed her gear and made her way to the training room. She was a perfectionist, always seeking ways to improve, to get better, to push her limits. She knew that one day, the stakes would be even higher, and she wanted to be ready. She started with a few rounds at the shooting range, her Barrett .50 feeling like an extension of her body as she lined up the targets. The gun responded to her commands with flawless precision. She fired shot after shot, each one landing exactly where she wanted it. The sound of the shots echoed through the range, each one a reminder of the power at her fingertips. But it wasn't just about the physical aspect of shooting, it was the mental discipline, the focus, that made her one of the best. As she finished her session, Lily wiped down her rifle, checking it over as if it were an old friend. Her hands moved with practiced ease, as if the rifle and she were one. It was a ritual she performed after every training session, ensuring everything was in perfect working order. It was the same way she approached life, methodical, calculated, and precise. But even with her expertise, she knew there was always more to learn, more to improve upon. She wasn't one to settle for mediocrity. She needed to be the best, and to do that, she had to keep pushing forward. Just then, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. She looked at it, recognizing the name immediately. It was from her commander, a request for her to meet in the briefing room in 10 minutes. Lily put her rifle down and grabbed her gear, heading for the briefing room. She didn't know what the next mission would be, but she was always ready. She had learned that being prepared was the key to surviving in this line of work. As she entered the briefing room, her commander looked up, a serious expression on his face. "Lily, I've got another mission for you. This one's personal, and it's going to take everything you've got." She raised an eyebrow, curious but not surprised. "What's the target?" she asked, her voice steady. "It's a high-risk operation. We've got intel on a terrorist cell operating out of the Middle East. They've been involved in multiple high-profile attacks, and we've just received information that they're planning something big." Lily nodded, her mind already running through the logistics. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow," her commander replied. "I know this is going to be tough, but I need someone who can handle it. You're the best we've got." Lily felt a surge of determination. This was what she was trained for. This was why she was a Navy SEAL. "I'm ready," she said, her voice unwavering. She didn't need to say more. She knew what was at stake, and she knew what had to be done. As she left the briefing room, she felt a sense of purpose settle over her. The next mission was already in her sights, and she would do whatever it took to complete it. There was no room for failure. Not for her. Not for the SEALs. The sun had barely risen as Lily and her team gathered in the operations room, their faces a mix of determination and focus. The briefing had been brief but critical, outlining the mission's objectives: infiltrate a high-security compound in the Middle East, neutralize the terrorist cell, and gather intel on their upcoming operations. The stakes were high, and Lily knew this mission would be one of the toughest yet. The plan was set, the team ready, but as always, it was the unknowns that kept her sharp. She was calm, but a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She glanced around the room at her team, each one fully prepared, their gear checked and rechecked. Mark, their team's communications expert, sat in the corner, his eyes glued to the screens, monitoring the satellite feeds. Next to him, Jake, the demolition specialist, was double-checking his explosives. Lily was always impressed by the way her team operated. Each member knew their role, and they executed it flawlessly. But Lily's mind was on the bigger picture, the target. This wasn't just any operation. This was personal. The terrorist cell they were targeting had been responsible for several devastating attacks, and the intel suggested they were planning something even more catastrophic. Lily had seen the destruction these groups could cause, and she wasn't about to let that happen. As she reviewed the mission details one last time, the weight of the responsibility settled on her shoulders. It was up to her and her team to stop this, and she wasn't about to let anything stand in their way. The team had trained for months for a mission like this. The compound they were targeting was heavily guarded, with layers of security designed to deter even the most skilled operatives. But Lily was confident in their abilities. She had faced tougher situations, and her team was the best at what they did. They would get in, get the job done, and get out. No questions asked. The aircraft lifted off from the base, the engines roaring as they ascended into the sky. The journey was long, but the time passed quickly as Lily and her team mentally prepared for the operation. As they flew over the desert, Lily stared out of the window, lost in thought. She thought about the men from the restaurant the other night, the ones who had attacked her. They had learned quickly that you could never underestimate a Navy SEAL. It was a reminder that, no matter where she went or what mission she faced, she would always be ready. And this mission would be no different. The aircraft touched down a few miles from the compound, the team moving swiftly into position. They had only a few hours to complete their objective before the window of opportunity closed. Lily led the way, her footsteps light but steady as they made their way through the desert terrain. The silence of the night was broken only by the sound of their equipment and the occasional whisper of the wind. As they neared the compound, Lily signaled for the team to take cover. They crouched low, moving as quietly as possible, their eyes scanning for any signs of movement. The perimeter was tightly guarded, but there was a gap in the security that Lily had spotted from the satellite feeds. It was a risk, but it was the only chance they had. With one swift motion, Lily signaled the team to move. They breached the compound's outer wall in seconds, the explosives placed by Jake doing their job perfectly. The team moved in, clearing rooms and securing the area with military precision. Lily's heart raced as they advanced, each step bringing them closer to their target. The tension was palpable, but Lily didn't let it show. She knew her team relied on her to stay calm and focused, and that's exactly what she did. They reached the main building, where the leader of the terrorist cell was believed to be holed up. The door was locked, but Jake was already at work, planting charges to breach the entrance. Within seconds, the door was blown open, and the team flooded inside. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with tension. Lily's eyes locked onto the target, an older man, sitting at a desk, surrounded by papers and files. He didn't move when they entered, but the look on his face said it all. He knew what was coming. Before he could react, Lily moved swiftly, her training taking over as she closed the distance between them. A single shot rang out, and the target fell. The room was silent once again. The mission was complete. But as Lily looked around the room, taking in the documents and the files on the desk, she knew this wasn't the end. The intel they had gathered would lead to even more operations, more missions to take down the network that had caused so much destruction. As the team extracted, Lily's mind was already moving to the next objective. It was the life she had chosen, and she wouldn't change it for anything. But as they made their way back to base, Lily allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She had completed another mission, another victory in the long war against those who threatened peace. But there was always more work to do. And she was ready for whatever came next. As Lily and her team returned to base after completing their latest mission, there was a sense of accomplishment, but also a lingering feeling of anticipation. It was the kind of anticipation that always accompanied a successful operation. The feeling that the job was never truly done, that there would always be another mission, another target to eliminate. They had completed the mission flawlessly, but there was no time to rest. Lily knew this better than anyone. She had been in the military long enough to understand that success today meant even more responsibility tomorrow. As she entered the debriefing room, her mind shifted from the personal victory of the mission to the next steps. The room was filled with the usual quiet murmur of soldiers discussing the details of the mission, but Lily was focused on the screen at the front, where her commander was preparing to give the next briefing. "Good job out there, everyone," her commander said, his voice steady but filled with respect. "We've neutralized the target and gathered the intel we need, but this is only part of the puzzle. There's more work to be done." Lily stood at the back of the room, her arms crossed, listening intently. She was used to these briefings, used to the constant flow of information and the unrelenting pace of the missions. The team was always moving, always preparing for what came next. But this mission felt different. It had been too clean, too quick. Lily's instincts told her that something wasn't right. As her commander went over the specifics of the next phase of their operation, Lily's mind wandered back to the compound they had just raided. There had been something in the air that day, something she couldn't quite place. A feeling of being watched, as if the entire operation had been a setup. But there was no time to dwell on that now. They had a job to do, and Lily was always ready. As the debriefing ended, the team filed out, each soldier heading to their own area to prepare for the next mission. Lily walked back to her bunk, her thoughts still swirling around the events of the past few days. She had learned to trust her instincts, and right now, they were telling her that things weren't as they seemed. She grabbed her gear, making sure everything was in place, then walked over to the training room. It was empty, just the way she liked it. The quiet of the room was a welcome relief, and for a moment, she allowed herself to relax. But she didn't stay still for long. The stillness wouldn't last. She was a SEAL, and a SEAL was always preparing for the next mission, always pushing forward. She began her usual training routine, rifle practice, hand-to-hand combat, tactical maneuvers. She ran through each drill with precision, focusing on the technique and form that had made her one of the best. As she finished her session, sweat dripping down her face, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was her element. But even here, in the solitude of the training room, the nagging feeling that something was wrong wouldn't go away. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, that the next mission was going to be different, more dangerous. Lily had been through many operations, but this one felt off. She wasn't sure how, but she knew it in her gut. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her commander, "Meet me in the briefing room in 30 minutes. Urgent." Lily's heart skipped a beat. She grabbed her gear and headed straight for the briefing room. As she walked through the hallways, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the unknown pressing on her. What was coming next? She couldn't predict it, but she knew it wasn't going to be easy. When she arrived at the briefing room, her commander was already there, waiting. The look on his face told her everything she needed to know. "Lily," he said, his voice low, "we've just received new intel. The terrorist cell we took out, it wasn't the only one. There's a larger operation at play, and we need to stop it before it goes too far." Lily nodded, her mind already running through the details. She knew this was going to be bigger than anything they had faced before. The adrenaline was already starting to pump through her veins, and she felt the familiar sense of readiness take over. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice steady. "We're going in, deep. It's going to be a high-risk extraction, but we have to move fast. The target is in a remote location, and we don't have much time. You and your team will be leading the charge," her commander explained. Lily's eyes narrowed. She didn't need to ask any more questions. She could feel the gravity of the situation weighing on her shoulders, but she was used to it. She was ready. "When do we leave?" she asked, her voice unwavering. "Now," he replied, his tone serious. "Gather your team. We move out in 30 minutes. As Lily walked out of the briefing room, her mind already shifting into mission mode, she knew this was going to be different. This was no longer just another mission. This was personal. The feeling in her gut had been right. The real fight was about to begin. As Lily and her team gathered their gear, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The mission was different this time, the weight of the intel they had just received hung heavy in the air. They had been briefed on the larger operation, the one that extended far beyond the small cell they had neutralized. Lily knew this was going to be their toughest mission yet. She could feel the adrenaline building up in her system, the familiar rush of being on the edge of something monumental. Her team was already suited up, their expressions serious as they prepared for what lay ahead. Mark, the communications expert, was double-checking the encrypted channels, ensuring that their signals would be secure. Jake, the demolition specialist, was inspecting the explosive charges, ensuring they were primed and ready to breach any obstacles that came their way. The rest of the team, each one a specialist in their field, moved with purpose, their actions synchronized like a well-oiled machine. Lily gave a brief nod to each member of the team, silently acknowledging their readiness. As the aircraft took off, the familiar hum of the engines filled the cabin, but this time, the silence was different. It wasn't the quiet before a normal mission, it was the silence before something much larger, much more dangerous. Lily stared out of the window, watching the dark expanse of the desert below them. Her mind was sharp, her focus unwavering as she mentally ran through the mission plan once again. This was no longer just a matter of executing a standard extraction. They were going deep into enemy territory, into the heart of the operation, to stop a threat before it could spread any further. The further they flew, the more the weight of the mission settled over her like a second skin. It wasn't just the target they were after now, it was the whole network, the entire operation that had been quietly building up beneath the surface. The stakes had never been higher. The aircraft descended into the darkness, the lights of the nearby base twinkling in the distance as they made their way to the drop zone. The plan was simple: drop in, neutralize any threats, retrieve the intel, and get out without being detected. But Lily knew better than anyone that things rarely went according to plan. As they approached the drop zone, she could feel her body shifting into autopilot. The training, the countless missions, everything she had ever learned in her career had led to this moment. She was ready. The team jumped, the wind rushing past them as they fell through the night sky, the world below them a blur of dark shapes and shadows. They landed with practiced precision, each member of the team hitting the ground without making a sound. The desert was still, the only noise the faint whisper of the wind. Lily scanned the area, her mind calculating their next move as she silently signaled for the team to move forward. They had to move quickly, but cautiously. Every step had to be calculated, every movement deliberate. The compound was just ahead, a series of low buildings surrounded by a high wall. The lights were off, the compound seemingly empty, but Lily knew that appearances could be deceiving. As they approached the outer wall, she motioned for Jake to plant the charges. He nodded, his fingers working with expert precision to set the explosives. Within seconds, the wall was breached, and the team moved in. They fanned out, securing the perimeter as they made their way deeper into the compound. Lily's eyes never stopped scanning the area, her senses heightened, her mind constantly processing new information. She could hear the faint sounds of movement in the distance, but it was too late for anyone inside to react. The team was already inside. They moved swiftly, clearing rooms with precision, taking out any guards in their path without a moment's hesitation. The compound was eerily quiet, the air thick with tension as they made their way to the central building. Lily could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Something wasn't right. They had expected some resistance, but the compound was almost too quiet. As they reached the main building, Jake planted charges on the reinforced door. With a quick signal, the door exploded open, revealing a room filled with maps, computers, and stacks of documents. But it was the man sitting at the desk that caught Lily's attention. He was older, his face hard with experience, his eyes cold and calculating. He didn't flinch as the SEALs entered, his hands resting calmly on the desk in front of him. Lily stepped forward, her eyes locked onto his as she closed the distance between them. The man didn't speak, but his gaze was piercing, as if he was already calculating his next move. Without warning, Lily's rifle was raised, and a single shot rang out, echoing through the room. The man fell without a sound, his body slumping forward in the chair. The room was silent once more. The mission was over, but the war was far from won. As the team secured the area and gathered the intel, Lily's mind was already moving to the next objective. The mission was successful, but there was still so much more to be done. She couldn't afford to relax, not yet. As they made their way back to the extraction point, Lily allowed herself a brief moment to reflect on what they had accomplished. They had stopped a major operation, but the fight was ongoing, and she was ready for whatever came next. The extraction was smooth, just as Lily had anticipated. The team was already heading back to base, the mission successful, but there was still a sense of unease in the air. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that they were missing a bigger piece of the puzzle. As they boarded the aircraft, the familiar hum of the engines filled the cabin, but Lily's mind was far from at ease. She glanced at the team, each of them focused on their own thoughts, but Lily could tell they were all on edge, just like her. The mission had gone flawlessly, but the quiet nature of the compound, the lack of resistance, still gnawed at her. The target had been too easy to neutralize, and the intel gathered had been too conveniently placed. She knew it was all part of a bigger scheme, and this was just one small victory in a much larger war. As the aircraft flew back, Lily's thoughts kept drifting back to the man they had taken out. He had been too calm, too collected. It was almost as if he had been waiting for them, expecting them. This wasn't a simple operation, and Lily was beginning to wonder if it had all been a setup. The feeling in her gut told her that this wasn't the end of the road. The enemy they had just faced was part of something much larger, something deeper. But for now, she had to let it go. They were headed back to base, and there would be time for analysis and reflection later. For now, she focused on the task at hand, debriefing and preparing for whatever came next. Back at base, the team was immediately ushered into the operations room, where the briefing would take place. The commander was already there, waiting for them, his expression serious. "Good work, everyone," he said, acknowledging their success, but Lily could see the concern in his eyes. "However, we've just received intel that changes everything." The room fell silent, and Lily felt the weight of those words settle in. She had known it. She had known that there was more to this than met the eye. "We've traced the connections of the target you neutralized, and it seems that he was part of a much larger operation." The commander continued. "This operation is connected to a network that spans across multiple countries, and it's far more dangerous than we initially realized." Lily's mind raced. She had suspected as much. This wasn't just a group of isolated terrorists. This was an international operation, one that had far-reaching implications. "What are we looking at?" she asked, her voice steady despite the rising tension inside her. "We're looking at a full-scale operation," the commander replied. "This is a global threat, and we need to act quickly." Lily's team exchanged glances, each of them understanding the gravity of the situation. They had been dealing with small cells, individual targets, but now they were looking at something much bigger. The mission they had just completed was only the beginning. "We're going to need every resource we have," the commander said, his tone serious. "Lily, I need you to take the lead on this. Your team is the best we have, and you're going to be the one to get us the information we need to shut this operation down." Lily nodded, already feeling the weight of the responsibility. She had led many missions before, but this was different. This was bigger than anything she had faced. "We'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice firm. "We're ready." The next few days were a blur of planning, strategy meetings, and intelligence gathering. The team was focused, working together seamlessly as they pieced together the fragmented intel. Every move they made was calculated, every step was planned, and Lily was at the center of it all, guiding her team through the uncertainty. They were up against a network that had been operating for years, and every second counted. The clock was ticking, and Lily knew that time was running out. The enemy had the upper hand, but they weren't going to let that last for long. The team was ready, and Lily was ready to lead them into the heart of the operation. As the final plans were set into motion, Lily stood at the front of the room, her team gathered around her. She felt the weight of the mission bearing down on her shoulders, but she wasn't afraid. She was a SEAL, and this was what she was trained for. The mission wasn't over. It had only just begun. The days following the briefing were filled with intense preparation, as Lily and her team worked tirelessly to piece together every shred of intelligence they could gather. They were now facing an enemy that was well organized and far more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. As the clock ticked down, the stakes continued to rise, and Lily knew that they were running out of time. The network they had uncovered wasn't just a few isolated cells, it was a global operation, a sprawling web of terror that reached across borders, governments, and continents. Each move they made had to be precise, there was no room for mistakes. The pressure weighed heavily on Lily's shoulders, but she thrived in this environment. She had led her team through dangerous situations before, but this was different. The magnitude of this mission was unlike anything they had faced. She couldn't afford to let her team falter, not now, not when so much was at risk. The hours were long, but the team stayed sharp. Mark worked on decrypting enemy communications, while Jake fine-tuned the explosives and gadgets they would need to breach the compound security systems. The rest of the team focused on tactical maneuvers, studying the compound's layout and discussing the most efficient approach to avoid detection. Lily had spent countless hours strategizing and running through every potential outcome in her mind. There was no way they could approach this mission without an airtight plan. The compound they were targeting was a fortress. It had been constructed with the utmost security, making it nearly impossible to breach without attracting attention. But they had the element of surprise on their side. The enemy believed they were safe, secure behind layers of protection, but they had no idea what was coming. As the mission day drew nearer, Lily gathered her team for one final meeting. They had gone over every detail, but she knew that the most critical moments were still to come. This wasn't just about taking down a terrorist network. This was about stopping a catastrophe before it could even begin. "We know the plan. We know the risks," Lily began, her voice calm but firm. "We move fast, we stay quiet, and we do our job. This is our moment, and we won't get another chance. Trust in each other. Trust in yourselves." Her team nodded in unison, their eyes filled with resolve. They were ready. At that moment, Lily felt a quiet surge of pride. She had led this team through countless missions, and each time, they had come out on top. But this time felt different. This time, they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. The team was briefed, their gear packed, and the plan was set. It was time. The aircraft lifted off, cutting through the night sky as the team made their way toward the target. The mission was a go. As they approached the compound, the adrenaline surged once more. The plan was set into motion, and the team moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. They landed a few miles from the compound, and the team quickly disembarked, their faces set in determination. The wind was sharp against their skin, the desert air dry and unforgiving, but none of that mattered now. The world outside their mission had ceased to exist. The compound loomed in the distance, the walls high and imposing, but the team was undeterred. They moved in silence, slipping through the shadows, avoiding the guards and the security systems as they closed in on their target. Each step was calculated, every move executed with the same precision that had defined their training. They reached the perimeter undetected. The explosive charges planted by Jake were set, and in seconds, the wall exploded, creating a path into the compound. They moved inside, the sound of their boots barely audible on the stone floor. Every room they entered was cleared with military precision. They were ghosts in the night, moving quickly and quietly, neutralizing any threats without hesitation. It wasn't until they reached the central building that the real challenge began. The leader of the operation was there, hidden deep within the compound, protected by layers of security. But Lily and her team were prepared for this. They had planned for every contingency, accounted for every obstacle. They breached the door, and the team moved in, guns at the ready. The target was in front of them, but he didn't flinch. He knew who they were. He knew what was coming. Lily's eyes locked onto his, and in that moment, everything else faded away. The world around them seemed to slow as she moved forward. The shot was precise, and within seconds, the target was neutralized. The room fell silent, save for the sound of their breathing. It was done. The team quickly gathered the intel and secured the compound. Their job was complete, but the war was far from over. As they made their way back to the extraction point, Lily's thoughts were already moving forward. This was another victory, but there would be more missions, more battles to fight. The fight was ongoing, and she would be ready for whatever came next. As the aircraft lifted off from the extraction point, Lily looked out over the horizon, her mind already focused on the next mission. There would always be more work to do, more threats to neutralize. But for now, they had won. They had stopped the enemy before they could strike, and that was enough. For Lily, it was never about the glory. It was about the mission, about stopping evil before it could spread. And as long as she was breathing, that mission would continue.